"Sir, you'll need to leave that seat. It's reserved for a premium guest." The words landed in the business class cabin like a crack through glass. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Even the soft hum of pre-flight chatter seemed to fade beneath the weight of that single sentence. Darius Vaughn looked up slowly from his tablet. He was already seated, already boarded, already holding a valid business class ticket purchased weeks earlier under his legal name. Yet somehow, in the eyes of the flight attendant standing over him, none of that seemed to matter. The woman's name tag read Nicole Whitman. Her smile was gone now, replaced by the kind of expression that disguised judgment as policy. Beside her stood a tall white man in an expensive navy blazer, a polished leather briefcase hanging from his shoulder. He looked annoyed, as though the situation itself was inconveniencing him. "There must be some mistake," Darius said calmly. His voice never rose. "This is seat 4A. It's the seat on my boarding pass." Nicole barely glanced at the document in his hand. "We've made an adjustment. Mr. Caldwell needs this seat." The man behind her nodded slightly, almost expecting compliance. Around them, passengers exchanged uncertain looks. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine. A businessman near the window paused his phone call. The atmosphere inside the cabin changed. It was no longer the comfortable quiet of travelers waiting for departure. It felt charged. Darius remained seated. Black t-shirt, dark jeans, running shoes. Nothing about him suggested power to the people judging him. That was the point. He had spent years learning that appearances often revealed more about other people than they did about him. Nicole folded her arms. "Sir, I need you to cooperate." Darius studied her expression. He had seen it before. At hotels, at private clubs, in boardrooms 20 years earlier when investors assumed he was part of the catering staff. Different faces. Same assumption. Ethan Caldwell stepped forward. "Look, I don't want a scene," he said loudly enough for nearby rows to hear. "But I fly this route every month. I shouldn't have to wait while this gets sorted out." The choice of words hung in the air. This gets sorted out. As though Darius himself was the problem. As though he were occupying a place he had no right to occupy. Nicole nodded sympathetically toward Ethan before turning back to Darius. "Sir, if you'd gather your belongings, we can find another seat in the back." The back. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. One young flight attendant standing farther down the aisle looked confused. Her name tag read Olivia Martinez. She glanced from Darius to the passenger manifest in her hands, then back again. Something didn't seem right, but she said nothing. Not yet. Darius slowly placed his tablet on the tray table and looked around the cabin. Every eye was on him now. Waiting, watching, judging. Some expected him to argue. Others expected him to surrender. Instead, he simply asked a question. "Are you removing me because of a ticket issue?" he said quietly. "Or because someone decided he belongs here more than I do?" The silence that followed was immediate. And for the first time since this began, Nicole Whitman had no answer. The cabin remained frozen after Darius asked his question. Nicole Whitman opened her mouth as if she intended to answer, then stopped. The silence around her seemed louder than any explanation she could have offered. Darius watched the uncertainty move across the faces of the passengers nearby. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked curious. A few simply looked away. He had seen that reaction before too. People often recognized unfairness long before they found the courage to acknowledge it. 15 years earlier, Darius Vaughn had been standing inside a small regional airport outside St. Louis, carrying a worn backpack and a notebook filled with business ideas. At the time, he could barely afford a coach ticket. A gate agent had mistaken him for a maintenance worker and asked him to clear away a stack of boxes left near the boarding area. He remembered the embarrassment. He remembered the laughter from a few travelers nearby. Most of all, he remembered the promise he made to himself that day. Success would never be measured by money alone. It would be measured by how many doors he could open. For people who were judged before they ever spoke. That promise eventually became a company. Then another. Then an investment group worth billions of dollars. Yet here he was again, sitting inside an aircraft at 30,000 feet below his actual position in life, and somehow still being measured by appearances. Ethan Caldwell adjusted the cuff of his blazer and glanced impatiently toward Nicole. "Can we please move this along?" he said. "We are delaying boarding." Nicole immediately nodded. "Of course, sir." The difference in her tone was impossible to miss. Respect for one passenger. Pressure for another. Darius noticed several travelers exchange glances after hearing it. Across the aisle, a woman quietly lowered her phone. She had clearly been reading emails moments earlier. Now she was paying attention to every word. Near the front galley, Olivia Martinez continued staring at the passenger manifest. Her brow tightened. She looked down once more, scrolling carefully through the list of names assigned to business class. Then she checked the boarding information again. Something about the situation refused to make sense. Darius Vaughn. Seat 4A. Confirmed. No upgrades. No reassignments. No changes. Her eyes moved back toward Darius. He sat perfectly still, showing none of the frustration many people would have felt by now. That calm unsettled her more than anger would have. People who knew exactly who they were rarely felt the need to prove it. Nicole finally crossed her arms again. Sir, I am asking one final time. Will you voluntarily move to another seat? Darius looked out the window for a brief moment. The afternoon sunlight reflected across the wing. Ground crews moved steadily below. Everything outside seemed orderly. Everything inside felt different. Then he turned back toward her and offered a small, almost thoughtful smile. No, he said quietly. I think I will stay exactly where my ticket says I belong. The air inside the cabin tightened like a cable pulled one notch too far. Nicole Whitman stared at Darius for a long moment, clearly unaccustomed to hearing the word no delivered so calmly. Most passengers either argued or surrendered. Darius did. Neither. He simply remained seated, his boarding pass resting on the tray table beside him like quiet evidence. Ethan Caldwell let out an impatient sigh and shifted his briefcase into the overhead compartment. Unbelievable, he muttered. Every flight has to have one person who thinks the rules do not apply to him. Several nearby passengers heard the comment. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. Darius heard it too, but his expression never changed. The window beside him reflected the movement inside the cabin. Flight attendants crossing the aisle. Travelers settling into seats. Phones lowering as attention drifted toward the unfolding confrontation. Nicole stepped closer. Sir, this is not a discussion anymore. Her voice carried farther than before. You have been instructed to relocate. Darius looked up at her. My ticket has not changed. Operational decisions happen, Nicole replied. Premium accommodations sometimes require adjustments. Ethan smiled faintly at that explanation. It was the smile of someone who expected the world to bend in his direction. Exactly, he said. That is how premium travel works. The words landed heavily across the row. One older passenger near the aisle lowered his newspaper and frowned. Another traveler shook her head quietly. No one spoke. Not yet. At the front of the cabin, Olivia Martinez continued reviewing the passenger records. The more she checked, the worse the situation looked. There was no seat reassignment. No equipment change. No upgrade request. No notation authorizing a move. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Seat 4A belonged to Darius Vaughn. She glanced toward Nicole, then back to the screen. Her stomach tightened. Meanwhile, Nicole seemed determined to push forward. If necessary, she said, we can have a gate supervisor verify the situation. Darius nodded. Please do. The response caught her off guard. There was no hesitation. No concern. If anything, he seemed almost interested in seeing what happened next. Ethan noticed it too. His confidence wavered for the first time. Only slightly. But enough. This is becoming ridiculous, he said. Everyone knows business class exists for a reason. Darius turned toward him. And what reason is that? Ethan opened his mouth, then paused. The cabin waited. People pay for a certain experience, he finally said. Exactly, Darius replied. Which is why I am sitting in the seat I purchased. The silence that followed felt different from before. Stronger. More people were paying attention now. More people were questioning what they were seeing. Olivia took a slow breath and stepped out from the galley. Her hands tightened around the manifest. She knew speaking up could create problems. She was new. Nicole was senior crew. But some moments demanded a choice. As she approached the row, Nicole noticed her immediately. Olivia, she said sharply. Return to your station. Olivia hesitated. Then she looked directly at Darius, then at the seat assignment in her hand. Something was about to change. The question was whether anyone in the cabin was ready for it. Olivia Martinez stopped walking for only a second, but in that second the entire balance of the cabin seemed to shift. Her eyes moved from the manifest in her hand to Darius Vaughn sitting quietly in seat 4A. Then she looked at Nicole Whitman. The contrast between them was impossible to ignore. One person was calm. The other was growing increasingly determined to force an outcome that the records did not support. Nicole, Olivia said carefully, I think there may be an issue with the seat assignment information. Nicole's expression hardened immediately. There is no issue. Olivia swallowed. Several passengers were now openly listening. I checked the manifest twice, she continued. Seat 4A is assigned to Mr. Vaughn. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread through the cabin. Ethan Caldwell frowned. Nicole stared at Olivia as though she had crossed an invisible line. Return to your station, Nicole said. Now. Olivia hesitated. Her training taught her to respect the chain of command. But her conscience was pulling in a different direction. She looked back down at the screen. The information had not changed. Darius Vaughn. Confirmed. Business class. Seat 4A. No modifications. No special accommodations. No operational. Reassignment. Nothing. I am just saying what the system shows, Olivia replied quietly. Nicole took a step closer. And I am telling you that this situation is already being handled. Across the aisle, a middle-aged passenger leaned forward. If her ticket system says the seat belongs to him, why are we still discussing this? The question hung in the air. Nobody answered immediately. Another traveler near the front nodded in agreement. The mood inside the cabin was changing. At first, people had assumed there was some administrative issue. Now they were beginning to wonder whether they were watching something else entirely. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. This is getting blown out of proportion, he said. Surely the airline can place him somewhere else. Darius finally turned toward him. Somewhere else, he asked. Ethan shrugged. Another seat. Another section. Whatever solves the problem. Darius studied him for a moment. Interesting, he said. You keep describing my seat as the problem. The response drew silence. Even Ethan seemed unsure how to answer. Olivia noticed it too. The more she listened, the more uncomfortable she became. She had joined the airline because she believed travel connected people. She believed professionalism meant treating every passenger with dignity. What she was witnessing felt very different. Nicole suddenly extended her hand toward the manifest. Give me that. Olivia reluctantly handed it over. Nicole scanned the screen for several seconds. Her jaw tightened. Then she tapped through multiple menus. Passengers nearby exchanged curious looks. Darius watched without saying a word. Something about Nicole's behavior seemed rushed now. Less confident. More defensive. A businessman seated 2 rows back quietly took out his phone and began recording notes. A woman near the window opened her camera app. Nobody announced it. Nobody made a scene. But the cabin was becoming a room full of witnesses. Olivia looked at Darius again. He remained composed, almost as though he had expected this moment to arrive. Then Nicole lowered the device and forced a smile that never reached her eyes. There, she said. Problem solved. But judging from the expression on Olivia's face, the problem had only just begun. Olivia Martinez felt her stomach drop the moment Nicole handed back the device. Something was wrong. She knew what she had seen only moments earlier. The assignment had been clear. Yet now the screen displayed different information. Seat 4A no longer showed Darius Vaughn's name. The change appeared so suddenly that even she struggled to understand it. Nicole slipped the device under her arm and forced another professional smile. As I said, she announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. The matter has been resolved. But the cabin did not relax. If anything, the tension grew heavier. The passengers who had been watching from the beginning understood that nothing had actually been resolved. The same man was still sitting in the same seat, holding the same boarding pass. The only thing that had changed was the explanation. Ethan Caldwell seemed encouraged by Nicole's confidence. There you have it, he said. The records are clear now. Darius slowly looked from Ethan to Nicole. Then he glanced toward Olivia. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Olivia felt as though he already knew exactly what had happened. Not because he had seen it, because he had seen situations like this before. The realization unsettled her. Darius rested his hands calmly on the armrests. Interesting, he said quietly. The records changed after they were questioned. Nicole's smile tightened. Sir, I am not going to debate internal systems with you. Several rows away, a passenger raised an eyebrow. Another quietly shook her head. The atmosphere inside the aircraft felt less like a flight and more like a courtroom where everyone was waiting for the next piece of evidence. Then something happened that pushed the situation beyond discomfort. Nicole reached toward the overhead bin above Darius's seat. Since you will be relocating, we should prepare your belongings. Darius remained seated. He watched her without raising his voice, without showing anger, without showing fear. The sight triggered a memory he had carried for decades. He was 17 years old again, standing inside a bus terminal outside Memphis. During a summer trip, he remembered the security officer who had questioned whether he belonged in the waiting area despite holding a valid ticket. He remembered the suspicious looks, the assumptions, the quiet humiliation of being treated like an exception instead of a customer. Most people forgot moments like that. Darius never had. They became fuel. They became lessons. They became the foundation of everything he later built. Back in the present, the cabin seemed smaller. The air felt heavier. Olivia could see it on the faces around her. People were no longer merely observing. They were judging what they were witnessing. Nicole turned toward the front of the aircraft and spoke into her communication device. I need a gate supervisor at business class immediately. Several passengers exchanged looks. Ethan straightened in anticipation. Olivia felt a knot form in her chest. Darius, however, simply reached into his pocket and unlocked his phone. He looked at the screen for a moment. Then he typed a short message and pressed send. No explanation. No warning. Just 6 words. Begin Protocol 7. The message disappeared. The phone screen went dark. And somewhere far beyond the aircraft cabin, something had just started moving. The message left Darius Vaughn's phone and disappeared into a network most people on the aircraft did not even know existed. Nothing visible happened at first. That was the unsettling part. No alarms. No dramatic announcements. No sudden reactions. Just silence. The kind of silence that arrives before a storm reaches the shoreline. Nicole Whitman remained focused on maintaining control of the situation. She glanced toward the front cabin door where the gate supervisor was expected to arrive. Ethan Caldwell settled back with growing confidence, convinced the matter was finally moving in his favor. Around them, passengers continued watching. Some pretended to check emails. Others stared openly now. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Olivia Martinez stood near the galley, unable to shake the feeling that something far larger was unfolding. She had replayed the events repeatedly in her head. The original assignment. The altered records. The pressure. The assumptions. None of it felt accidental anymore. Darius, meanwhile, appeared completely at ease. He looked out the window again. Ground crews moved across the tarmac beneath the late afternoon sun. Fuel trucks rolled past. Baggage carts crossed the service lanes. The airport continued operating as if nothing unusual was happening. Yet thousands of miles away from the runway, inside corporate offices and secured networks, Protocol 7 was already spreading through the system. Less than 2 minutes after the message was sent, an operations manager at Airline headquarters received an automated priority alert. Then another. Then another. Executive review requested. Passenger dispute flagged. Crew conduct investigation initiated. Access logs requested. Cabin records frozen. Internal audit activated. The sequence moved rapidly through departments that rarely interacted with one another. Back on the aircraft, Nicole's communication device suddenly chimed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Another notification appeared seconds later. Then a third. Her confidence flickered. Only briefly. But Olivia noticed it. So did Darius. Nicole quickly dismissed the alerts and slipped the device into her pocket. Ethan leaned toward her. Everything all right? He asked. Of course, she replied. Her voice sounded slightly tighter than before. The cabin door opened. A gate supervisor stepped aboard carrying a tablet. His name badge read Brandon Keller. Nicole immediately approached him and began explaining the situation. Passengers watched closely. Brandon listened without interrupting. Then he looked toward Darius. Then toward Olivia. Then back at the tablet. His expression slowly changed. Not dramatically. Just enough to suggest he was seeing information he had not expected. Nicole noticed it too. Is there a problem? She asked. Brandon did not answer immediately. Instead, he tapped through several screens. The silence stretched. Darius remained seated. Calm. Patient. Certain. Finally, Brandon lowered the tablet. That is strange, he said quietly. The records are locked. Nicole blinked. Locked. I cannot modify anything, Brandon replied. Actually, nobody can. A murmur spread through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged looks. Ethan's confidence faded a little more. Nicole stared at the screen in disbelief. Then another notification appeared. This one caused Brandon's face to lose color entirely. He looked from the tablet to Darius Vaughn and back again. Whatever was happening had moved far beyond a seat assignment. And for the first time since the confrontation began, Nicole looked genuinely nervous. Brandon Keller continued staring at the tablet as though the screen had suddenly become impossible to understand. The notification remained there, bright against the display. Executive oversight active. Restricted review in progress. Do not alter records. Around him, the atmosphere inside the aircraft shifted again. Even passengers who had been trying to ignore the situation were paying attention now. Nicole Whitman stepped closer. "What does that mean?" she asked. Brandon hesitated. "I have never seen this protocol before." That answer only made the silence heavier. Ethan Caldwell looked from one employee to another. The confidence that had carried him through the confrontation was fading fast. For the first time, he seemed uncertain about which side of the situation he was standing on. Then another alert appeared on Brandon's screen. He read it once, then a second time. His eyes widened slightly. "The aircraft has been placed on a temporary departure hold," he said. A murmur moved through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged surprised looks. A departure hold was not normal. Not for a seating disagreement. Not for a customer service dispute. Nicole immediately shook her head. That cannot be related to this. Brandon did not answer, because deep down, he suspected it was. Near the galley, Olivia Martinez felt her heart beating faster. She had joined the airline less than a year earlier. She knew enough to recognize that headquarters rarely intervened in real time. Yet that was exactly what appeared to be happening. The entire system seemed focused on a single row inside business class. Darius Vaughn remained seated, calm, unmoved. The same composure he had shown from the beginning. The same composure that now felt almost impossible to explain. Nicole finally turned toward him. "Who are you?" she asked. The question escaped before she could stop it. Darius looked up. For several seconds he said nothing. Then a faint smile crossed his face. "I am the passenger assigned to seat 4A, he replied. The answer only deepened the mystery. Another notification sounded. This time it came from Nicole's own device. She glanced down and immediately lost color. An instruction from corporate operations appeared on the screen. Maintain current conditions. Executive review team en route. Do not remove passenger. Do not modify records. Nicole read the message twice. Then a third time. Ethan noticed her reaction. "What is going on?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Outside the aircraft window, baggage vehicles continued moving across the tarmac. Airport workers continued their routines. The world carried on normally. But inside the cabin, time seemed suspended. Then the public address speaker crackled. The captain's voice filled the aircraft. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. We are awaiting authorization from corporate operations before departure." The announcement stunned the cabin. Corporate operations. Not weather. Not maintenance. Corporate operations. Passengers looked around in disbelief. Olivia stared toward Darius. Brandon stared toward Darius. Even Nicole could not stop looking at him now. The questions were multiplying faster than the answers. Finally, Darius reached into his pocket and checked his phone. A new message had arrived. He read it once and locked the screen. Headquarters was ready. The review team had completed its verification. And within moments, everyone on board was about to learn why a simple seat assignment had brought an entire airline to a standstill. Darius Vaughn slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked toward the front of the aircraft. The cabin had become so quiet that even the distant sounds from the jet bridge seemed unusually loud. Every passenger was waiting. Every crew member was watching. Brandon Keller's tablet chimed again. This time he did not try to hide the screen. The message was impossible to ignore. Executive review team connected. Live audit authorized. Nicole Whitman stared at the notification as though it belonged to someone else's flight. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered. Brandon slowly shook his head. "It is not." Then his device rang. Not a text. Not an alert. A direct call. Brandon answered immediately. The voice on the other end spoke for less than 30 seconds. Nobody else could hear the conversation, but everyone could see the effect. His posture straightened. His expression changed completely. By the time the call ended, he looked less like a supervisor and more like someone receiving instructions from the highest level of the company. Nicole stepped forward. What did they say? Brandon took a breath. Corporate leadership has completed its review. The words spread through the cabin like electricity. Ethan Caldwell shifted uneasily in his seat. Olivia Martinez stood frozen near the galley. Several passengers openly lowered their phones from eye level, not wanting to miss a single second. Brandon looked directly at Nicole. The passenger manifest was altered after boarding. Nicole's face immediately lost color. That is impossible. The audit confirms it, Brandon replied. Every change was logged. The silence that followed felt enormous. Then another voice joined the conversation. Nicole's communication device activated automatically. A woman from headquarters spoke clearly enough for several nearby passengers to hear. Employee Nicole Whitman, your system access has been suspended pending investigation. Please discontinue all operational activity immediately. Gasps spread across the business class cabin. Nicole stared at the device in disbelief. Seconds later, her company tablet displayed a red authorization warning. Access denied. The screen locked. Brandon's tablet chimed again. Employee record restricted, he read quietly. Flight authority removed. Olivia covered her mouth. Ethan looked stunned. Nicole appeared unable to process what was happening. Then the same voice returned through the device. Additional findings confirm unauthorized passenger accommodation attempts and improper reassignment. Procedures. Every eye turned toward Ethan. The businessman suddenly seemed much smaller than he had an hour earlier. I did not ask for this, he said quickly. Nobody responded, because the attention had already shifted elsewhere. Slowly, Darius Vaughn stood from seat 4A. No dramatic gesture. No raised voice. Just calm certainty. He looked around the cabin, meeting the eyes of passengers who had witnessed everything from the beginning. Then he spoke. You tried to remove me from a seat I paid for, he said. On an airline partially owned by the investment group I lead. The words landed harder than any shout ever could. Nicole froze. Ethan stared in disbelief. Olivia's eyes widened. Brandon lowered the tablet. The mystery was gone now. The truth had arrived. And with it, the entire cabin finally understood why one passenger's quiet refusal had brought an entire airline to a standstill. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The revelation settled over the cabin like a sudden change in altitude. Nicole Whitman stared at Darius Vaughn as though she were seeing him for the first time. Ethan Caldwell looked down at the floor. Brandon Keller remained motionless beside the aisle. Even the passengers seemed caught between disbelief and understanding. The story they thought they were watching had changed completely. Yet Darius did not look victorious. He did not look angry. If anything, he looked disappointed. The woman from headquarters continued speaking through the communication device. Additional reviews would be conducted. Audit findings would be documented. Employee access restrictions would remain in place pending investigation. The language was professional, precise, final. Nicole lowered herself into an empty jump seat. The confidence she had displayed earlier was gone. Olivia Martinez stood quietly near the front galley, absorbing everything. Darius noticed her and gave a small nod. It was not dramatic. It was not performative. But Olivia understood. She had chosen to speak when remaining silent would have been easier. Sometimes that mattered more than people realized. Brandon cleared his throat. Mr. Vaughn, he said carefully, on behalf of the airline, I apologize. Darius looked at him for a moment. Thank you, he replied. But this was never about me. The statement surprised several passengers. Darius slowly looked around the cabin. The problem was not that you did not know who I was, he continued. The problem was how quickly assumptions replaced facts. Nobody interrupted. Nobody looked away. If respect only appears after a title is revealed, then it was never respect to begin with. The words lingered in the air. A woman across the aisle quietly nodded. Another passenger lowered his eyes. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For the first time since boarding, he seemed to understand the deeper lesson hidden beneath the confrontation. Outside the window, the sun had begun its slow descent across the horizon. Golden light stretched across the wing. The aircraft felt calmer now, lighter, as though the tension that had consumed the cabin was finally releasing its grip. The public address system activated once more. This time the captain sounded confident. Corporate authorization had been received. Departure preparations would resume shortly. A soft wave of relief moved through the passengers. Darius returned to seat 4A and picked up his tablet. No celebration. No applause requested. No dramatic speech. Just a man returning to the place he had occupied from the beginning. Yet before he sat down completely, he offered one final thought. I did not raise my voice today, he said. I raised the standard. Silence followed. Then someone near the back of business class began clapping. Another passenger joined. Then another. Within moments, applause spread through the cabin. Not because of power, not because of ownership, but because people recognized something bigger. Dignity, fairness, accountability. Darius acknowledged the passengers with a slight smile and finally took his seat. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate and began moving toward the runway, one truth remained behind in that cabin long after the wheels left the ground. The people who had changed that day were not the ones who discovered who Darius Vaughn was. They were the ones who finally understood that every person deserves respect before anyone knows their name.